Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today we're going to be discussing the books I read in August. So August, as I've already established, I took a break from booktube, but not a break from reading entirely. I did manage to complete 10 books, which was honestly shocking to me. I thought it would be way less because the first week and a half, 2 weeks of August, I barely read anything. I was gonna say this feels familiar, but that's because I literally just posted my July wrap up because again, I took a break and we're still doing catch up. I hope that this video will be quick. We'll see, as we always see. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't have to follow a TBR because I didn't film an August TBR, so I kind of got to read what I want, which was an interesting experience. So yeah, let's just get into the video. Also, actually I lied. Before we get into the video, I'm now going to be putting content warnings, I believe, in the description of my video, so if you want to see them, they'll be written out, but it won't bog down the runtime. So we're gonna ignore the fact that I look like an entire bum right now. It's my day off and I'm exhausted. But I forgot to mention that I DNF'd a book right at the beginning of the month, which is No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull. This is a book I had on NetGalley and was approved for it so long ago and was waiting for it to get closer to the release date and unfortunately could not continue. I DNF'd it at 20%. I think some people could like it. I just was an extreme reaction to the writing style. This story is about this murder gets caught on tape of like a wolf-like being killing someone, but then I think once it starts going viral, it gets edited or people can't find the proper footage anymore, and so like secret societies start to crop up and stuff, and I just couldn't stand the writing. I hated it. I personally really struggle with third person present, and on top of the perspective, I just didn't like the writing. I found it really hard to get engaged, and I knew if I continued it, I would give it 1 star. I just couldn't continue, so I DNF'd it, which is actually kind of huge as well because I DNF'd 2 books in 2 months, which is something I never do. But anyway, moving on. The very first thing I read in August was You Had Me At Hola by Alexis Daria. I wanted something quick and easy, and this is a contemporary romance between 2 actors. One, she is popular from doing various soaps, and she wants to break in and move up in her career, and the love interest, the hero, he is a bit older and he's very popular from doing telenovelas, and he also kind of wants to break into Hollywood, so they're starring on a TV show together, and their first kind of meeting is kind of really bad, but they seem kind of intrigued by each other. I actually was really into this book. I was a little nervous. Sometimes books about famous people I'm not super into, or high drama romance I'm not super into, but this one I really got into. It gave me Jane the Virgin vibes, which I really liked the first season of that show, and was sort of kind of swept up in the drama a little bit. I really dug. It's interesting because there's borderlines on some miscommunication, refusing to communicate, but the way it kind of resolves, and the reasons behind it, I was more okay with than normal. I also was really into their chemistry, the way that they were into one another. I also loved the surrounding plot points and stuff that were into this, talking about Hollywood and representation in Hollywood. It was very near a 4-star or 5-star, excuse me, but I wasn't into what the main male characters, whose name I'm forgetting everyone's names at this point. He said some really way out of pocket, out of left field, crazy mean stuff when they're at the 3rd act sort of portion that was way extreme, and I don't think Pop properly apologized for some of the stuff. I was like, whoa, back up. Just because you're mad and upset doesn't mean you have to go insulting her, you know? Anyway, so I gave this 4 stars. Did really enjoy it, and it it was exactly what I wanted it to be, and I'm very interested in reading her next book in this series, which, is it out already? I'm not 100% sure. One of them being the Stonekeeper's Curse. This is Amulet Book 2. It's a graphic novel series, middle grade graphic novel series that I have actually enjoyed so far. I've only read, obviously, the first 2 volumes. I really like the art. It's really inventive, and love like the surrounding world and all the peoples that we're seeing. A lot more violent than I expected, and I'm actually really into it and impressed with it because it is a story for children. It doesn't like shy away from that, and I really like our main character's internal struggles. I forgot to tell you what the graphic novel series is about. Essentially, a family has to move back to like the mother's old hometown where her father used to live, and then the 2 siblings discover like this magical secret world and an amulet that has like incredible magical powers, and that amulet is like really sought after by multiple different types of people, so they're like immediately targeted. Quick, short, and easy to the point. Yeah, super into it. I think I gave this 4 stars. It was good. I then finally finished Sabriel by Garth Nix. This was one I was working on for quite a while and I did in like sort of multiple formats, but I finally completed it, and I don't entirely know what the struggle was, other than I just wasn't super feeling reading at that point in time. But this is very classic YA, almost YA before YA existed. It follows Sabriel, whose father is the Abhorsen, who essentially protects this world from like beings coming back from the dead and like wreaking havoc. And then she gets like an emergency message right at the beginning of the book that her father is in like mortal peril. I liked this, but didn't super love it, and I'm not entirely sure why. I really did like the main character, Sabriel. She, I thought, was very interesting, kind of stoic, and like very pragmatic, which from a main character, sometimes it's really, really nice to see that. I was really into one type of magic, the death magic, and the way all that stuff really worked. Was super into it. But then there's another type of magic that isn't explained like at all, and I was left sort of confused. And the world and setting kind of threw me, I don't think was established enough for me to be satisfied with it. I was kind of confused at there being like cars and stuff in like one world, and it wasn't established enough for me to really understand what was going on exactly. So didn't love the world building. The plot felt a little rushed to me at points, but I did like where it went. I'm interested in where the story left off, but I did give this book 3 stars. It's not like bad by any means, but it didn't like really super stick out to me, other than really loving like the death magic stuff. So I do think I'm going to continue on. I do own the rest of the series. It's fine. Yes, we're going to stick with that. 3 stars. This was another book that carried over from July. I read it like half audiobook and then half physical, and that's Dragon Pearl by Yoon-Ha Lee. I found this used literally in July and just on a whim decided to pick it up. And a little bit to mixed results, which I'm bummed by because I've been recently trying to experiment a little bit more with middle grade. This is an interesting blend of sci-fi. It's definitely a sci-fi world, but fantasy elements that are based on Korean mythologies. We follow a young girl named Min who is a fox spirit. Her whole family is, but in this galaxy, being a fox spirit is not a great thing. Like, they're discriminated against basically from every other type of magical and non-magical being, so her family kind of hides that. Then her brother goes missing as a cadet somewhere looking for the mythical magical Dragon Pearl, and then is labeled to be a deserter, but she knows that her brother would never be a deserter, so she kind of goes on the run and then like looking into what happened to her brother. I really liked the world a lot. I loved the blend of sci-fi and fantasy elements. I loved what Yoon-Ha Lee was able to establish in a 300-page middle grade book. The world was interesting. The grander politics behind it were interesting, and I really liked how he put that and did it in a middle grade story that I was impressed by. Our main character I didn't super love. She was a little brash, and she was fine, but honestly it was the plot that started to lose it at the end. There were just portions that seemed to drag on too long. She's undercover at some point in time, and that was really, really dragging. It was a lot darker and harder hitting than I expected. There are some big topics and themes discussed in here, which I really appreciated. But I also kind of got a little annoyed with the use of magic in here. Because she's a fox spirit, she has magic called charm, which almost gets used as shorthand for her to do whatever the hell she wants. Throughout the story, she just uses charm to charm the guards or to turn into a table, and like it was just a little bit too much that the magic could do. It became like shorthand and a little bit like of a cheat, in my opinion. I gave this 3 stars, a little disappointed. Halfway through the month, it then occurred to me that I have read so few of the 20 books to read this year, and then I became concerned because essentially if I don't read them, I have to unhaul them. I think I'd only read like 7 so far, which wasn't great. So I decided to make a concerted effort and read books off that list, starting with one that has been intimidated me for years. That's Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien. This is a literary fiction, historical fiction story with many timelines, and it essentially, how do I want to pitch this? It follows a woman who, as a girl, her family kind of takes in another girl from China who's had some like traumatic things happen to her, and then we slowly unveil throughout multiple timelines how their families are connected and what happened to this girl to make her have to escape China. I liked this, but there was some slow going. It was very ambitious, but I don't think it entirely hits the mark. Also, before I continue, I know I said content warnings are in the description. Please check out the content warnings for this one. There are major content warnings for suicide, like multiple times. So just as an extra warning. The multiple timelines got very confusing because there was no clear break or way to indicate when the thing had shifted. It was told out of order, so we jump like all over in like the eras, and it really was hard to keep track of, especially at the very beginning when you're just trying to figure out what's going on. There's also an element of almost a story within a story, and at some points I couldn't tell if it was like fiction in the story or a part of like actual characters' backstories. So it was rough going at the very beginning. I was very concerned, and I almost DNF'd it like 50 to 100 pages in because it was rough. I think the second half of the book is way stronger. You start to figure out how, or see the like plot threads coming together, how these two girls are related to one another and how their stories would like intersect, and you get more and more familiar with the other characters like in the past. I really liked the second half. I learned a lot about the era in China that this is discussing. It follows like Maoism and like the fall of Mao. So I actually did some additional reading because it's not a era that I'm at all familiar with. So that was interesting, and it was interesting to learn more about on my own. And I found the end to be unsatisfying. I really wish something tied together or tied up a little bit nicer, because it was a little bit of a slog and I was really hoping for a different resolution. So ultimately I gave this one an incredibly frustrating 3 stars. Like, there were really good parts in it, but I think some little changes could have been made to make it a lot stronger, especially just like any sort of like line break or something to indicate that we've gone into the past, you know? That's why I'm very frustrated. And I gave it 3 stars. I picked up The Martian by Andy Weir. This is incredibly popular. Man gets stranded on Mars and has to survive until like a rescue can come, and all the complications of surviving on Mars that would happen. I I'm happy I like this because the first 50 pages, I was ready to like smash and burn. 1 star. This is the worst thing I've ever read because the writing style is a lot. He has a very distinct voice and a very distinct sense of humor, which I was fine with. I wasn't like totally jiving with it, but the sheer amount of exclamation marks that Andy Weir uses with Mark Watney talking, I was ready to throw the book and just be done. It truly is so weird and like, is disconcerting the word I want? I guess off-putting when you have multiple exclamation points on the page. And I know this is told partially in a diary entry like format, but it just feels so wrong. Like I couldn't stand it. But luckily there is a perspective shift and it's not all told from Mark Watney's point of view, and I enjoyed that because it gave a bit of a breather from the dreaded exclamation points. The one thing that was a little weird to me was that we would have Mark Watney explain to us, the reader, through his diary entries what he was attempting to do to survive, like his immediate process through like that day or that week. And then it would flip to like, you know, NASA, who at some point in time like can't communicate with him, so they're trying to figure out what he's doing. So we get told what he's doing through 2 different perspectives, and it just seemed odd to me. I feel like it would have been a lot more natural if Mark was just like doing his thing, and then the more sciencey explanation came from like the NASA and that stuff, because it seemed weird for him to be giving like multiple paragraphs long explanations into the science behind it. Because if you're writing a diary, you're not going to be like, hey diary, this is how you do this. So I think that could have been circumnavigated if NASA was describing like most of the tech stuff to us. And it just felt like a waste of time because we already knew what Mark was doing. So why does NASA have to tell us what he's doing, you know? Anyway, I also think this went on a little too long. I think it could have been maybe 50 pages shorter, because near the end, it's like a survival story. So I wanted it to pick up a little bit. I gave it 3 stars again. A lot of mediocre or frustrating 3-star reads this month, but it's lucky because at the beginning it was going to be a 1 star. So I'm happy I liked it more. I also decided to tackle Elantris this month. It's one of the books I had to read this year, and I've just been wanting to get back into the Cosmere. So I did. This is one of Sanderson's like pretty like much standalone books. It's also his first ever published work, so it was interesting reading that and seeing like the formation or like the very first thing that he did. And he's incredibly consistent. His writing is consistent. The style doesn't seem to have changed super a lot. It's so interesting to see sort of themes as well that he decides to tackle and discuss again and again. Some themes and stuff that I really love watching explored. I always love watching him explore religion through the fantasy lens, and there is a character experiencing a very interesting loss of faith because he's also like sort of a zealot, which I was super into. The characters I actually liked a lot, which I don't know if is an unpopular or popular opinion. I think I actually plan to do a full review for this because I've reviewed everything that I've read in the Cosmere of his so far. But I was really into the characters this go around, which is a lot to be said because I've struggled with his characters in the past. I really always appreciate the world building, although I do think he's done it better in other stories. I don't know how to say it without insulting this book, but a lot less ambitious, or it's a lot more of a one concentrated story than other things that he's read that have a lot more of an epic scale. So it's really big for these characters and this like couple cities and countries, but it's not to the grand scale of Mistborn or The Way of Kings. But I also was really into his take on a smaller scale story. Really loved the political maneuvering and political struggles a lot. Like that, I was also really loved watching the sort of chessboard match between two characters. I gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it, and was really happy with it, because I've seen some people not like this one, but really liked it. I fully forgot to write notes for this next book, which is interesting. Don't know how I did that, but I completed Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Bashardost. This is a young adult standalone Snow White reimagining. Follows 2 women in dual timelines. One is our Snow White character, and one is like the sort of evil queen character, and you watch how their like stories intersect, and it's very like, it almost like it this book is another one I was frustrated with, because I liked the things that it subverts. I really was into the relationship between the 2 main characters and how complex it was. But the middle half, or the middle third of the story, was so boring, and I was starting to get really, really mad at it, because I thought it was going to go a very traditional route. And so like the middle chunk I was just so bored by, and like just so disappointed with. But I thought the first third and the last third were incredibly strong. And for this type of story, I don't think you need a ton of world building, but you needed more than what we got in here, because they basically just talk about the North and the South, and that's it. And it's like, what? And the curse that's in here isn't developed enough. So it just, some of like the plot points seemed a bit like half-assed, or just not addressed enough. And the characters are what are focused on the most, and I think what needed to be focused on the most, but the other elements of the story was not great. Also, it's sapphic. Our Snow White character has a slight, tiny little burgeoning relationship. I think this reads on the younger end of YA, and if you really like that, or if there's someone you know who really likes like the younger end of YA, I think this would be a great recommendation. I was hoping for a little bit more depth to the story. I haven't fully thought out what I'm giving it, but I think it's going to be like 2.5 stars. I'm pretty disappointed with this one. The final things that I completed in July, I actually read throughout July via audiobooks, because again, I was feeling very sad and just very tired, so I wanted something comforting. So I decided to reread again The City of Brass and The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. Literally my favorite series of all time. It's books 1 and 2 in the Daevabad trilogy. I talk about them literally all the time. I'm going to reread the final book in September, because I feel like it. And I think post a review and discussion from the whole trilogy, because while I've posted a lot of videos related to them, it's been videos related to individual books, and I would like to talk about the series as a whole and why I love it so much. I love these books. If you want, check out my reviews for them in my discussions, or keep an eye out for my full trilogy discussion, but I love them so much. They are so special to me, and they bring me comfort, which might sound weird, because if you're familiar with it, it's quite a heavy series at times. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite read of August was, because honestly, a lot of these were disappointing to me. I gave out so many 3 stars, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.